Dickey Chapelle had been a war correspondent for nearly 3 years and hadn't seen any action yet. It was 1945 and she was stationed on a hospital ship that was receiving wounded soldiers from Iwo Jima. She was told to stay on the ship, but she managed to get to land and make her way to an encampment where she found a lieutenant with a jeep who agreed to take her to the front lines. When they stopped, he said this was as far as he could take her, and she wasn't seeing a photo that she could get published anywhere, just a man in his Jeep. There was a sandy ridge nearby, so she climbed up to the top. She was hoping to see some action or something of more visual interest that she could get published. All she saw were some sandy ridges and tanks off in the distance. After she climbed back down the dunes, here's what she said the lieutenant had to say to her. "That was the goddamnedest thing I ever saw anybody do in my life. Do you realize all the artillery and half the snipers on both sides of this fucking war had 10 full minutes to make up their minds about you?" She had never been on the front lines. She didn't have any combat training, and she didn't know to keep her head down, but that's how she learned. Dickey Chapelle was born Georgette Louise Meyer in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1918. She took the name Dickey because she was inspired by the explorer Admiral Richard Dick Byrd. At 16, she got a scholarship to MIT to study aeronautical engineering. But while she was in Boston, she became more interested in reporting on the Navy and Coast Guard than she did with going to her classes. So after her second year, they asked her not to return. She ended up at TWA, where she took a photography class with Tony Chapelle, who she would marry in 1940 and take his last name. When World War II broke out, both Tony and Dickey Chapelle went to become war correspondents. And Dickey felt it was necessary to protect her husband's ego and try not to earn more money than him. She said, quote, "I never looked for a job if I thought it was one Tony would have wanted, telling myself it wouldn't be considerate to get a bigger income than Tony." Jumping back to Iwo Jima in 1945, Chapelle made her way between different divisions for 10 days before the Navy finally caught up with her, pulled her off the island, and withdrew her military press credentials for leaving the ship in the first place. Chapelle would travel the world telling stories with her husband for the next decade, until she found out that he was cheating, of course, and they divorced in 1955. That year, she decided to go back into combat photography and obtained military press credentials from the Marine Corps. From there, Chapelle covered wars around the world, like the Hungarian Uprising, the war in Algeria, and the Cuban Revolution. She was embedded with Fidel and Raul Castro and became enamored with them. But then, later on, she realized she was being used as a tool for communist propaganda and learned about the atrocities they had committed and quickly changed her tune. In 1961, she went to Vietnam and was reporting on U.S. forces, supposedly advising South Vietnamese troops. But it turned out that the U.S. advisors were doing more than merely advising troops, and the pictures ended up winning her awards. In November of 1965, it was her 4th trip to Vietnam. She was on patrol with some Marines when a nearby soldier set off a tripwire that exploded a booby trap and ended her life at the age of 47. She was the first American female war correspondent to die while covering combat operations. She was given a full Marine burial, and 5 decades later, she was named an honorary Marine. Now you know Dickey Chapelle.